So has Games Workshop already stealth revealed the contents of Combat Patrol Space Marines? If so, it might be looking surprisingly small, with 5 Terminators, 2 characters, and just one small squad of Infernus Marines. Let's talk about what evidence we have that this set is the Combat Patrol. Hello and welcome back to Warspets Tactics, where today I thought I'd make a video that I was holding off on for quite a while now. Basically, during the Warhammer Fest reveals, Games Workshop revealed the Tyranid Combat Patrol. They said it would be a subset of the Leviathan box, and they heavily implied that Space Marines were going to be getting a similar treatment as well. From one of the teasers of the Leviathan rulebook, it was very heavily implied that we already knew the contents of Combat Patrol Space Marines, but had been holding off until then as the contents just seemed a bit light. Since then though, I have noticed a couple of other bits that kind of imply that this could well be Combat Patrol Space Marines, so let's have a talk about it. So first up, in amongst all the excitement of the Tyranid reveals of Warhammer Fest, Games Workshop did just casually tell us that this will be Combat Patrol Tyranids going into 10th, 2 sets of Termagants with their friendly Rippers, the Winged Prime, Von Ryan's Leapers and those Barbgaunts, plus the new Psychophage monster that eats things. I believe that the exact quote that they used was, "This is the Tyranid Combat Patrol for 10th and you get it in this box." It did seem very likely that they'd be phasing out the current Tyranid Combat Patrol, as that one has tons of Termagants in that are now the old version. It certainly seemed on the cards that they'd redo it once they revealed that they'd updated the Gaunts, which are such a heavy part of the old box. Overall, to be honest, this does look pretty excellent. It's not literally the entire Tyranid side of the Leviathan box. You're missing things like the Neurogaunts, the Screamer Killer, and that great big Neurotyrant. But overall, I think it's really quite respectable. A character, 21 swarmy guys, 8 medium guys, and 1 small monster. Not much not to like there, I think. I think the Psychophage miniature is particularly fun. Seems to be one of the picks of the Leviathan box when I did that rating the miniatures poll the other day. It was kind of weird though that at the same time they didn't announce the Combat Patrol box for Space Marines. It just seems interesting that they basically had the Tyranids all shown off, but they didn't really talk about the Marine side of things. But basically at the same time as the Leviathan book details dropped, they also gave us a whole bunch of different pages of previews, and perhaps one of the most interesting ones that I zeroed in on straight away was playing the Combat Patrol section, which has the exact contents of the Tyranids Combat Patrol that was confirmed, against a slimmed down version of the Space Marines from the Leviathan box. I did see a fair bit of chatter at the time as to how this could potentially be the Space Marine new Combat Patrol for 10th, though I must admit initially I was kind of doubtful, which is why I've held off on this video for a while. It certainly does make logical sense though. If we've got the Tyranid side of the box on the right hand side, it would only make sense that they're fighting against the Space Marine side of the Combat Patrol. But the reason I felt that it was just a little bit unlikely was just how few miniatures the Marines had on the table, the Terminator Captain and Librarian, 1 small squad of 5 Infernus Marines, and the Terminator units just maybe seemed a little bit disparate, particularly when you put them next to the Tyranids, of just how much less plastic the Space Marines would get if that were the case. I was kind of wondering if there might be another unit hiding out of sight behind one of the buildings, maybe the Dreadnought or another squad, but it did seem kind of unlikely they'd be so completely eclipsed when they've clearly been set up to show up the models as best as possible. We did just get another very small clue as to which miniatures would be in the Space Marine Combat Patrol with their Warhammer Fest demo games. One little detail that was kind of subtle was that the Infernus squad kind of had 2 datasheets revealed at the time. They had this snazzy digital one that Games Workshop put up on their main website, complete with Oath of Moment and their ability, but the one that the demo game people had when they were playing at the table was a slimmed down version of it, slightly altered with some rules changes. As DW have mentioned already, basically in 10th edition the combat patrols will be balanced against each other, and the only way that they can do that is making datasheet changes, as of course if you're just playing with a combat patrol box set, you don't really have points values, as you can't take or lose any miniatures. It looks like the way that they're going about doing that is making some minor changes to certain special rules, which perhaps seems like one of the most easy ways to make things work a bit better balanced against each other for combat patrol. It does seem to be the way that that works, as the Termagants also had 2 different datasheets shown off. One of them looks like a slightly toned down version of the units that included the Rippers. That was the datasheet on show at Warhammer Fest, and it would kind of make sense that the Tyranid side of things might need to be toned down a bit, as it looks like they get an awful lot of models in that box, at least compared with other combat patrols in the game of 40k at the moment. Not surprised they might need to make the Tyranid datasheet just a little bit weaker if they're going to be fighting against other armies that have far less models. If you are interested, then the changes to the Infernus Marines were that they lost the faction ability Oath of Moment. That was replaced by Angels of Death, which we don't know what that does. It really makes sense though that Oath of Moment will be utterly broken at small combat patrol levels, basically giving you massive rerolls to most of your army most of the time. They also lost their unit ability to cause battle shock as well, making them a bit more of a simplified datasheet. Finally, when I was just having a nose through Games Workshop's videos, there was another image that I'd not spotted before. This one's from one of their videos about the Leviathan book, and it just happens to have the exact same set of Space Marines included, 5 Infernus Marines, 5 Terminators, and the Terminator Captain and Librarian. The title of the book is a little bit obscured, but it looks like it ends in Octavius. I'm guessing something like Strike Force Octavius or Battle Force Octavius maybe. And though the page is held at a really awkward angle so you can't really read most of the words, it looks like it just has a little breakdown of the 4 different units, really presented in the sense that this is a tabletop force and a set of units that you might be expected to use in a game together, as opposed to just showcasing some random Space Marines. It really does remind me quite a lot of those Combat Patrol little preview things that they had in the various codexes, where they basically show off the Combat Patrol for the faction and a way that you can play them at a small points level. Between those 3 things, I think that there's at least a very decent chance that this will represent Combat Patrol Space Marines in 10th edition, 1 Captain in a Terminator armor, 1 Librarian in Terminator armor, 5 Terminators and their friendly teleport homo and getting an assault cannon, and then 5 Flamethrower Infernus Marines. As I mentioned though, it does seem very small if it's the Combat Patrol, which might mean that Games Workshop treats it in a different way somehow. Though admittedly, it does look like it could well be game balanced, to be honest. It looks like it adds up to about 500 points in game currently. I'd guess the Terminators are probably going to be going up a little bit, seeing as they've gained Toughness 5 and a 4+ Invul more importantly. They're enormously difficult models to remove now. Perhaps the most curious thing about this though is how it adds up money-wise, and it just kind of implies that either this is going to be really quite a bad deal for people trying to save money, or it's going to be delivered in a different way, either a Combat Patrol box set that's deliberately costing cheaper to get newer players into Space Marines. It could be some combination of starter set kits that we've not seen yet, or it could literally just be a rules Combat Patrol that's used for people who have bought the Leviathan box only. Though my guess is probably not if they have said that they're basically having a new Tyranid Combat Patrol out of the miniatures. It just seems very likely that Space Marines will get a similar treatment when they're designing the factions. If it were costed just at the standard £95 or $160 though, the value savings are going to be pretty tiny. At typical Games Workshop prices, the characters add up to $80, the Terminators $60, or the Infernus Marines $30, and that's before accounting for the fact that they're monopose kits, as opposed to any multi-part kits that I'd guess would follow them up. Overall, it will be a very tiny discount by Games Workshop's current standards, somewhere around the 5 or 10%. Not nothing, but probably not enough to outweigh going full fat plastic. It is a bit weird to be honest, as I feel like the Tyranid kit could certainly stand on its own as a full price Combat Patrol. This one really doesn't seem to in terms of value for money wise though. I'm genuinely interested to see how they handle this, whether it will be just cheaper than normal, or perhaps be more something to do with starter sets and maybe the Phobos one will stick around. Let me know your thoughts though. Does this really represent Combat Patrol Space Marines for 10th edition from these hints? And if so, how good do you think it would be to pick up, maybe if you weren't picking up Leviathan? Look forward to hearing your thoughts down in the comments. Feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics if you'd like to see more like this. And finally, if you have been enjoying all the videos on the channel, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page as well, which is how I can keep these videos coming quite so regularly. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things happen next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.